everyone. I thought I'd give you an update on how I'm getting on with the new set of skirmish rules called Daisho, which is set in mythical Japan. On the last video I made about the rules, I suggested it would be useful if the online resources included a way of printing out a card for each of the figures that the person was playing with, that would make it easier for them to keep track of. And in fact, I've been back to the website since that video, and they have in fact got a spreadsheet that allows you to print out cards. So I either missed that at the time or they've put it on recently, but either way it's a very useful resource to have and does improve the quality of the game. The one problem with it is that it's designed, this is a typical example, it's designed to actually fold over, so you have the back of the card here where you can put a picture of your figure and details of which faction the figure belongs to, and over here are all the stats for the figure, and it's designed to fold in two, so you've got the back and front of the card, and then you can laminate it. But the problem I found with that is that there's an immense amount of detail that you have to put on this reverse side, and you're typing out the details into boxes on the spreadsheet, and it's quite hard. I mean, for instance, here you can see this character's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 skills, as well as a leadership skill, which you've all got to print out in a very small box. So it does mean either you leave the box clear and try and write it with a washable pen onto the laminated card, which I think is the idea, but physically I find it's impossible to write that number of skills with a sort of blunt tipped pen, which washable pens tend to be, into that small space. So what I've done is type them out in very small font so that at least they're legible, but of course that does mean that having printed the card out, you're stuck with those attributes for that figure forever, or else you have to print out multiple cards and laminate them, each one, which makes the whole thing a little bit expensive. And the other problem that's just me, personal quirk, is that I do like to see the photograph of the figure on the same side. Otherwise you've got to keep turning the thing over, and yeah, that's not a great problem, but I prefer to actually have both sides facing me. So I've printed them out like this, laminated them, and yeah, it's brilliant. It helps with the gameplay. Now today I persuaded a friend of mine, Pete from Mini Warzone, who you may be familiar with. Mini Warzone is his YouTube channel. It's worth taking a look at, very good channel. I persuaded him to come over and give me a game of this, because he's got a lot of samurai figures that he uses for the game Ronin, as have I, and he sent me photographs of each of his figures in his buntai. He was going to use the Koryu buntai from the North Star set that's been devised to be played with Ronin, and we were going to transfer that across to Daisho. So he sent me photographs of each of his 9 figures, and I'd printed those out onto card in exactly the same way, so that it had a card ready for each of his figures in his buntai. And it did involve basically you have to find sort of matching types in the Daisho set of rules. So there's a buntai in the Daisho set called the Komosuti Ryu, which is basically a koryu which is situated in a village called Komosute. So it's almost a perfect transfer. But you then have to sort of set about giving each of the characters various attributes. So, for instance, his main character, the sensei of the buntai, is a straightforward swap, and you can use a named figure called Manamate Tora, and you can use the various skills and attributes that he has available in the Daisho set of rules list. And then as a second in command, there's a figure in the Ronin set which has a Nodachi, a long sword, large two-handed sword. And I've made him the second in command, another named figure called Amechi Jantaro, with a variety of skills that you can pick for him that are suggested in the book. And then he had this guy in Ronin is forget what he's described as, but he's like a senior one of the buntai. And there are two others similar to that in Ronin, who I've called adepts. So they're just generic figures, they're not named. So there are two adepts. And then in Ronin you have these figures called novices. In Daisho they're almost exactly the same, only they're called initiates. So he's got 5 of those, and I've not given them a great deal in the way of skills. They've got a key power called Second Chance, which basically allows them to, once in the game, re-roll a failed dice roll, and that's about it. And those 9 figures with those skills come to about 300 points. 284 points. No, I beg your pardon, 322 points. And it does suggest that you begin your first game with about 250 points. So he's got quite a lot to deal with already, just with those 9 figures. That'll keep him occupied. So I didn't really want to allow him any more figures than that, but he was hoping to bring along a couple more figures, sort of hired hands with bows and things like that. But it does say in the rules that the Ryu has to specialise in one particular weapon. So a sword is fine, be it a katana, a wakizashi, a nodachi, whatever. But you can't then give another figure a bow. They all have to have one speciality. So I've limited him to 9 figures, and I've given myself, I'm going to use 5 ninja figures, which come to 284 points. And that's I reckon that's going to be fair, because he's got about another 40 points than me, but he's not familiar with the rules, so it should be a fairly even game. The ninja figures that I've got, I've given them a greater variety of skills and attributes and equipment and so on, because I should be able to remember what I'm doing with them better than he, because he's going to be learning the rules. So I've got figures with grenades, with shuriken, the throwing stars. The leader has got some poisoned weapons. So I'm going to have quite a lot on my plate just remembering what to do. Okay, now over the last weekend I went round a friend's house and played a game of Saga, which is a Dark Age skirmish game, and like myself, he purchased about 15-20 years ago a lot of Purbeck terrain, which is this modular terrain, the terrain tiles, and I've had tons of it up in the attic. I must have bought it well over 15 years ago, because I've lived in this house 15 years and it was addressed to my old abode, and I still hadn't got it out the wrapper, so I thought, why not get it out and play with it, give it an airing after all these years, and it's perfect for this game. I've got it. This is a 4 foot by 3 table, but I wanted to play on a 3 foot square playing surface. So at the back, I've used a lot of special blocks that they made for me, custom made, which represent the sort of mountainside, and that's going to be impassable terrain. So effectively, we're playing on a 3 foot square surface. I'll give you a little close up of all the terrain in a moment, but we were going to play a scenario called The Secret. I'll read you excuse me, the details of that. Under a tree in the centre of the table sits a hermit monk who holds a terrible secret. He is surrounded by a wall of flying knives that will attack anyone foolish enough to try and pass through them. The flying knives hit automatically, and the victim must make a karma roll with a -2 penalty. The area surrounding the hermit monk is also sanctified ground. Sanctified ground basically means you can't use magic properties within it. It is said that the hermit monk will only impart the secret to someone who is worthy. To be considered worthy, the person must first step through the wall and survive. Once the secret is imparted, the hermit monk dies, the wall of flying knives disappears, and a kami, that's a spirit, emerges from the tree to stop the secret getting out into the world. It will pursue the keeper of the secret to the table edge. So you basically set up the terrain. So I've invented this terrain, which, as I say, I'll show you in a moment. Include a great tree in the table's centre, under which you place the hermit monk. The wall of flying knives circles the tree 3 inches from its trunk. Deploy as normal. So what I'm going to do is have one buntai coming in on one corner, one on the other, and they're going to have to cross that bridge in the centre of the table, and the tree with the hermit underneath it is on the other side of the bridge. And across the table there's a gorge with a river running through it, which I'm going to make impassable terrain. But the distance across the impassable terrain is actually jumpable with any figures that have the heroic feat ability, which is a key power. So once per turn, once per game, there are a couple of figures on the table that would be able to jump that, but of course they'd then have to use the bridge to get back across, because they would have expended that ability. And basically what's happened, unfortunately, is that Pete has got this vlog of his own, and I was watching it yesterday night, and he mentioned in one of his videos that on Monday he'd had to go into hospital with breathing difficulties, and he's on medication that basically suppresses his immune system, so he has to be a little bit careful of coming into contact with viruses and things. And unfortunately, as you can probably hear, I've got a little bit of a sore throat at the moment, and I'm coughing up a lot this morning, so we thought it better to postpone the game. So I just wanted to give you really an update on where I am, and I'll leave the table set up, and hopefully we'll get a game played next week, and we'll be able to video it and give you a battle report on it. But I'm going to just take you around the table now, show you how I've set it up, and describe what I hope is going to happen. Okay, so basically the table slopes up towards a mountain in the distance. You can see it there, and on the lower slopes here there are cherry trees, which I'm going to say are soft cover if you're obscured by them or your figure is on any of the round bases, so you can see through them, but they give soft cover. And in fact, as I said earlier, Pete's Buntai don't have any shooting weapons, but I've got a few figures that have throwing stars, so they count as shooting weapons. And each Buntai is going to start in the corner, one corner up this end. So just to give you an example, this is my Ninja Buntai of 5 figures here, ready to go, and Pete will be on this corner here. He'll set up in this corner, and then the figures will be hostile to one another, or the Buntai, each Buntai will be, so we'll be fighting our way across the table to this feature here, which is an aquarium ornament. It's worth checking out when you're in garden centres and places like that. It's worth checking out the aquarium section for useful wargaming terrain. This was extremely cheap to buy. If you were to buy purpose-built wargaming terrain set in Oriental Japan, you'd pay an absolute fortune for something like this. And I was going to use this as a place, I forget exactly what they call it. It's something. It's not sanctified ground, but it's something like that. And basically, when you have a figure within it, what you can restore 1 key power per turn. So if you remember from my review of the rules, basically the key powers are you only use them once per game, and you can restore them by killing or dispatching another figure. That's one way, but this will also allow you to restore them by hanging around in there for a game turn. So then further on from the shrine there, the Torii Gate, is a bridge that crosses this steep gorge, which, as I say, is going to be impassable. It is jumpable with the heroic feat, though, which is the key power that I was on about earlier. Again, a couple more trees. These are willows. I know they're not really ideal for the side of a gorge. They look better on the side of a river itself, but I thought I'd chuck them in. And then across the bridge you have the Hermit, which I'm using that Perry figure to represent, and this is a Japanese oak model, so I thought I'd use that as the sacred tree. And the wall of knives is supposed to be 3 inches out from the tree. I wasn't quite sure how to represent that, so I put some rocks around the tree. They're a little bit further away than 3 inches, but what the hell. And then that tile block there I thought could make the front boundary. So if you cross that line or get within the perimeter of the rocks, then you've crossed the wall of knives, and you have to take your chances with that. There's a little bit more cover. I put pines here to represent the sort of higher altitude. If the fighting kind of moves outwards, then that will give a little bit more cover as well. And then right in the back you've got this steep mountainside, which is going to be impassable, so that forms like the boundary of the table there. So the way I see the game developing is that there's going to be a little bit of fighting going on over here to begin with, and the route across the gorge, other than for the figures that have the heroic leap, is going to be backwards and forwards over this bridge, so that's going to be critical to the game. And the minute that a figure has successfully crossed this wall of knives, then a tree spirit is going to emerge. So you're somehow going to have to time your acquisition of the secrets so that you have a few other figures in your buntai over here as well that can deal with the tree spirit whilst you make your escape, or the figure that has the secret makes its escape over the bridge, back across to the other side of the table and to the table edge, and then the game will be over. So it'd be interesting to see how we think out of various strategies. But I'm looking forward to the game. It's just a pain that we can't play it today. I'm going to try and keep the table out. It's taking up a bit of space in my front room, but never mind, I can put up with it for a few days, and I'll just have to watch television from the corner of the room. And that's about it really. So hopefully in about a week's time I should have another video with a battle report of how the game actually went. See you then.